into and through the receiver-transmitter crystalline structure, it tunes us into this tiny range of frequencies called visible light, and this becomes the only reality. But interspersing this reality is all existence. And just outside of this frequency range, just beyond visible light, lie these reptilian entities and many other entities too. And you know, you'll be in a house and you'll see a cat, for instance, reacting to what is to us empty space. And you'll say, what's wrong with a cat? Don't be daft, nothing there. But to the cat, there is something there. Because its visual frequency range is much greater than ours, and therefore it's seeing things in the space that we can't see. And it's because this knowledge is kept from us that things that are happening in the world are dismissed as ridiculous, and people like me are dismissed as crazy, because it's a very simple, very powerful thing. And it sounds an obvious truth, but sometimes we miss the obvious truth. People's sense of what's possible comes from what they think is possible. And what they think is possible comes from the information they receive to tell them what is possible. If you suppress the knowledge of what is possible, you suppress their perception of what is possible, and they will laugh in the face of the truth and say it's impossible, when actually, if you understand to a greater level than the mainstream allows you to understand, you realize not only is it possible, it's perfectly bloody logical. So, just as we have ghosts, as we call them, which is energy just outside of our frequency range, and sometimes it just enters our frequency range and we can see it as ethereal. Whereas if it was absolutely on our frequency range, it would look as solid as you and me. It's like a radio station not being quite on the dial. You don't get a sharp reception, you get interference. And in the same way, these reptilian entities lock into these bloodlines and take over their mental and emotional faculties. I've talked to many psychics around the world who have the ability to go further out than the norm in terms of their decoding of sight. And they, many of them have told me how they've seen not just reptilian entities, but other entities too, non-human, who are what they call overshadowing humans as they observe them, and locking into these bottom two chakra points here, the base chakra and the one just above. And what they're doing, because the body's a hologram, is they're locking into that human energy field, and they're taking over its mental and emotional processes and perception processes. Now, let's go back. There you go. Oh yeah, we'll come to them in a sec. It's all about vibration and vibrational compatibility. These reptilian entities are vibrating to a certain frequency. Humans are vibrating to another frequency. What the hybrid idea is about is to infuse as much of this frequency, because that's what it's all about in the end, frequency, because that's the base prime reality of the hologram. It's to infuse as much of this frequency into this frequency to make them as compatible as possible, to allow this age-old recurring theme right up to the present day of possession to take place. And it's much easier to possess something that you are in vibrational resonance with, or much closer to it, than something that's very much further out. And so these hybrid bloodlines basically are there to create the vehicles that these reptilian entities just outside of this frequency can then take over. And they are manipulating this world through apparently human bodies, when if you could see further out, you would see anything but a human overshadowing these people that are in the positions of power. So these guys, I found this picture on the internet, it's very appropriate. These guys are basically empty shells. And they are vehicles to, I'm not saying every one of these are, but I think most of them are from what I'm looking at. But the basic theme is the people in positions of power are merely vehicles for something else that is in control of their faculties and control of their mind processes. So we have the the advisors in the shadows within this reality, who really are in control of the people who appear to be in power, and then one step back from them, just outside of this visible light dimension, we have these entities that are calling the shots in so many ways through into this reality in terms of what happens here. And after my experience of this explanation of the schism and all the rest of it, I refer to these now as the schism people, because this schism resonates out down into this reality, this disharmonious conflict, chaos, and all the rest of it. And as it plays itself down into this reality, it manifests itself in various ways. And it is in those entities that lock into that schism energy, they manifest its state of being. They are expressions of it. And you find that these people do not have the basic values of compassion, empathy that most humans have, because they're locked into a deeply disharmonious and imbalanced consciousness that manifests out those values. And so to these people, pepper bombing Baghdad, they have no emotional consequence for that at all, because they have no empathy. Whereas we couldn't do it because we would have empathy with the consequences for others of their actions. And so they are operating on a completely different point of observation of life, reality, than we are. And therefore, anything goes with these people because of that. And these schism people, as they've taken control of human society, have created what? A human society that represents that schism. It's division. It's fighting with each other. It's trying to compete with each other, dominate each other, top dog, up the greasy pole. They're all manifestations of this basic energy disharmony. And so it goes up the levels from the human up through, eventually, to this schism energy. And all these things are manifestations within the decoded holographic world of the state of disharmony of this energetic schism, which has affected life in this reality, this part of it anyway, so fundamentally. So you have these reptilian entities, I'm sure other entities too, but the reptilian thing keeps coming up, who take over the thought process and mental processes. And we see the human, when we decode that energy field of human, but behind it is something looking very different. Someone sent me this picture. It may be just a play of the light, but it's symbolic of what so many people see. Some people see full body shifts. Talk to those people all around the world. But what seems to be the common theme more than anything is the eye shift, where they take on a reptilian type straight down pupil instead of the round one of the human, very much symbolized by this. And a few weeks ago, a scientist friend of mine called me and said he'd been chatting to an acquaintance of his who's just been doing, I don't agree with it, but he's just been doing research into iris scan technology, which led him to look very closely at 2,300 eyes as part of this research. And his friend didn't know anything about my stuff at all. He was just in a conversation, and he said that around 4% of the eyes that he looked at very closely appeared to be of reptilian type and appearance, which is maybe about the percentage we're looking at. Someone sent me this with Father George Bush. I don't know, I think that's, again, a play on the light, almost certainly, but so symbolic, because I know a number of people have seen this guy shift. There's a magazine, it's called 40 Times or something. A few years ago, they ran this front page picture, taking the mick out of me, and I said, thank you very much. That was very symbolic. I love that. Thanks very much. And so you find a few of these pictures on the internet now as it gets around. Hey, there you go. And one of the things that I've looked at very closely over the years, particularly towards the end